there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm giving an update on the Very Vintage Christmas Readathon. What I've been reading for this Readathon that I am hosting during the month of December. And I am loving it. Y'all, I'm loving it. This is just so perfect for me. So thank you for joining. If you haven't picked up a book yet for the Very Vintage Christmas Readathon, I encourage you to do so. And the group read this year is Miracle on 34th Street by Valentine Davies. And I did finish this book this first week. I read this and several others, and I'm just going to give you a little spoiler for this video. I loved everything I read this week. I had the best reading week. It was so much fun. Now, were these books like the most profound, thought-provoking books that I've ever read? No. One of them is pretty thought-provoking, but they were just great books because they were old Christmas classic type books, old-fashioned type Christmas stories, and they gave me all the warm and fuzzy feelings of Christmas. And so I just loved it. I've loved every minute of my reading this week, and I needed this so much because I went out of town for Thanksgiving, and when I got back, I was just so stressed out about just everything, because when I go out of town and I get back, I always feel like I'm behind. Even though I enjoy going out of town, it's something about getting back and getting back in your routine. And I go out of town a lot of Thanksgivings, not every Thanksgiving, but a lot of times we go out of town for Thanksgiving. And I always do this to myself. I'm like, I'm never doing this again. But I do enjoy the time with my family away, and we do love doing that. So, you know, you just have to make it all work out. Anyway, I say all that to say I'm so glad that I am hosting this Very Vintage Christmas, because it gave me a chance to pick out some really good books to celebrate Christmas, to kickstart my Christmas holiday. And it was just so much fun. I just loved it. So I can't wait to tell you about the things I've read and the things I'm going to read, because I'm just excited about everything I'm reading in December. And I have so many books on my shelf that I need to get to, yes. But do I care? No. Because I want this to be Christmas vintage everything. So that's what I'm going to do. And so I'm going to say right now for you, if you're trying to push and get a goal reached for this year, go do that if that's really what you want to do. But if you're in the mood to read something else, go do that too. I mean, don't worry about it. You can get to that other book later. And that's probably not very motivational for your goals. I'm sorry. But I want you to enjoy what you read. Make sure you're enjoying what you read. And sometimes, especially on BookTube, we get caught up in all these things to read and goals, and I am the worst at that. So I'm talking to myself. That we kind of lose sight of just the fun of reading. And I just want to say this week has been a great week of reading for me, because it just gave me all the nostalgic Christmas feels. So let me tell you about what I read. So the first thing is, this wasn't the first thing I read. This is the one I want to talk about. Miracle on 34th Street by Valentine Davies, because this was our group read. Now, I say was, it is our group read. If you have not joined our Voxer group and would like to, you can read this anytime during December, and it's only like 120 pages. So you certainly have time during December to read this one. You probably could read this, depending on if you have an extra day or something, over the weekend or even in a day. So I do encourage you to read it, because I am so glad I chose this for our first Very Vintage Christmas Readathon, because it was perfect. This, I think, was published in 1947. I might be wrong on that, but I think that's when it was published. And I read at the end of this little book, it tells a little bit about Valentine Davies. And I didn't know he was such a famous person. But in the screenwriting world, he had won several awards. And he wrote the book, but what happened was he wrote it and with the intention of writing a screenplay for the film. And he took that somewhere, and they loved it, and they wanted the book to come out at the same time as the movie. So the book and the movie actually came out the same year. I had no idea, but that's what it talks about in the back. Pretty interesting guy. So if you do get this edition, in the back is just a couple of pages. At the back is like a little, I think they call it a historical note about the book and Valentine Davies, who wrote it. But this was precious. If you've ever watched Miracle on 34th Street, you'll know this story. Now, I am familiar with the 2000-something Miracle on 34th Street. It's beautiful. It has beautiful costumes, beautiful music. Just the music itself is worth watching the movie. There are some precious scenes with Santa Claus and the children that just make me want to cry. They're so heartwarming. And I love, especially the costumes. The costumes are just gorgeous. I love the way that they have Susan, who is the main little girl in the story that meets Santa Claus. Susan's costumes are just so pretty in the 2000-something version. So I encourage you to watch that. I watch it every year because I will just have it playing because I like to hear it in the background. He is a perfect Santa Claus. She is a perfect Susan. Mrs. Walker is a perfect Mrs. Walker. And so I was just so excited to read this. Well, after reading it, I realized that the book is a lot different than the movie I watched. They have updated it. So when I got to the end, there was a scene at the very end of this book that I remember seeing in black and white. And I don't know when I saw it, but I remember this scene of a courtroom with all these letters in it, and I thought, okay, that's what that was. I was watching Miracle on 34th Street, but I didn't know it. So I am going back now that I've finished it, and I'm going to watch the original movie, and then of course I've got to watch the one that I love so much, the colorful updated one, and just enjoy them. There are differences, and so I'm pretty sure the first one must be the book. It sounds like it, especially since they came out with the book, you know, at the same time that they came out with the movie. It's probably pretty close. So there's a couple of names that have changed in this book as opposed to the movie that I remember, the most recent movie. But it still was wonderful, and I'm so glad I read it. There were some precious scenes. There's a guy named Fred that was fantastic. His name is Brian, I think, in the other version, but he is fantastic. Susan, Mrs. Walker, they are just such great characters, and I loved it. And again, it's just a simple little story, but it really packed a punch with me. I just enjoyed every night going to bed with this book. And so I do recommend it. And if you want to join us on the Voxer, just email me your handle on Voxer and I will put you in the group. They are still reading it and talking about it. I have finished it, but I want to talk about it. So you read it and then we can talk about it. And I looked to see if there happened to be an audio version. I couldn't find one. There is like a radio drama and there is an abridged version. Now, abridged, it must be pretty short if it's an abridged version. But I haven't listened to those, so I don't know how they are. But let me know in the comments if you do have an unabridged version of the book. I would love to know that. If not, and if you can't get your hands on the book, I encourage you to go find that radio drama or the abridged version on audio and just listen to that maybe while you're wrapping your presents or cooking or whatever. It would be a great addition to your Christmas festivities. Anyway, again, highly recommend this, and I loved it. Okay, so let's look at the Very Vintage Christmas board, and for that book, that would fulfill several prompts. It would fulfill old-fashioned Christmas because that is a vintage cover, and I think that's pretty vintagey. And then it could be for the Nutcracker because it does have a fairy tale magical element to it, so it could be for that. A Christmas wedding was to read a book that was a romance or had a wedding in it, and this does have a little romance, so it really could fit for that too. Gift giving, there are some special gifts given in this book, so it could just count for that. Jolly Old Saint Nick was to have a Santa or something Santa related on the cover, and if you look, there is Santa Claus right here. over the mantle, and there's Santa Claus right there where he's behind on the sleigh with the reindeer pulling the sleigh. So this would fit for that. So this fits for a lot. Also for the movie adaptation, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the prompt for that is to watch a movie adaptation of your favorite book for Christmas. And this is a favorite for me. So I usually watch Christmas Carol, which of course I will watch A Christmas Carol. And I usually watch Miracle on 34th Street. Y'all, I watch them. I have them just play while I'm doing things in the house because I like a lot of the music that they have in them and things, and it just makes me happy. So I will be watching Miracle on 34th Street, the original as well as the updated for that prompt. So this fulfills a lot of prompts on the game board. Okay, so for me, the old-fashioned Christmas was to read anything old-fashioned, traditional Christmas related. So it could have a scene in the book that was an old-fashioned Christmas, like one of the Little House on the Prairie books. I know they have a couple of those have some great Christmas scenes in them. Or it could have a vintage Christmas cover. So for this one, I actually read what I was basing this prompt on, and that was the Washington Irving Christmas Dream Sequence. There are 5 short stories that Washington Irving wrote about Christmas, and they happen to be in this book that I had, so I read them from here. And what I did was, starting December 1st, I read 1 short story a day. And so I read it for the first 5 days of December, and this was a great surprise for me. I wasn't sure because I love The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I love that. I read it pretty much every October. It's a favorite short story, and I love short stories. But some Washington Irving stories I don't like that much. I don't know. It's just the way that they're written. I just don't understand some of what he's even talking about in some of those short stories. But I have to say I did love these. Now, I will say I didn't really feel that they were like short stories. They felt more like Christmas essays. It was kind of like encouraging you to celebrate Christmas in an old-fashioned Christmas way. And I loved that. They gave me a lot of feelings of old English traditions at Christmas time. There's a lot of descriptions of the food that they're eating, the games that they're playing. It was just wonderful. And I loved reading those for the first 5 days. It was a good way for me to kickstart this very vintage Christmas readathon. So I do recommend the Washington Irving short stories, but if you're not into short stories, I don't know how you'll feel about them, but they are more essay-like, more of just celebrating Christmas traditions, you know, old-fashioned kind of Christmas. So anyway, I did love that, and I used that for the first prompt, old-fashioned Christmas. Then for A Christmas Carol, I read one that a couple of you, I think, recommended this to me, and so I hunted this down. This is called The Bird's Christmas Carol by Kate Douglas Wiggin. For this prompt, look at that beautiful cover. For this prompt, I wanted you to read something musical, something that had a musical element. It could be like A Christmas Carol, of course, by Charles Dickens, or this book, which is called The Bird's Christmas Carol. And if you look, you can see the musical element to it with the staff. It's actually, the title is written in a staff at the top. And anything like a play on a Christmas Carol or anything musical would fit for this prompt. So I decided to read this because several of you told me that I would love it. And it's by Kate Douglas Wiggins, who wrote Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. So that made me even more interested. So I hunted it down and I read this. And this was published. It's got a, look at that in the front. Isn't that sweet? There's a little inscription to someone. It says, Merry Christmas to Aunt Charlotte, I think it says, from John Joyce and Mary Dorothy Graham. I just love that. But in the front, and there's some great pictures in this too. Look at that. But in the front, it says that it was published in 1886. So this is definitely an oldie goldie. And I loved every minute of it. It was so sweet. So thank you for recommending this book. It was heartwarming and sweet. I don't want to say too much about it. It is short. It didn't take me but a day to read this. And if I say one word, you'll know exactly what happened. So I'm not going to say the word, but I loved it. I did love this book. It was about giving and what the real meaning of Christmas is all about. And it was sweet. It was really a sweet one. And I can't say any more because I'll ruin the story. So anyway, I do recommend this. It's called The Birds Christmas Carol because it's about this family. Their last name is Birds. And they have a little girl on Christmas Day named Carol. So that's all I'm going to tell you. And it is an old-fashioned Christmas story. I think you can find this on audio version too. I think there was an audio version. I tried. What I did was when I was looking these books up, I was trying to find audio versions in case you didn't have time to read them. You could just listen. And I meant to make a list. Maybe I'll do that in the next video. But I meant to make a list. And I'm thinking this was on there. I can't remember. But anyway, check to see if you don't have time or if you can't find this little book. Okay, so then I read, so that was for A Christmas Carol. So I have fulfilled Old-Fashioned Christmas with the Washington Irving short stories, A Christmas Carol with the Birds Christmas Carol, and the Nutcracker, a magical element with our group read, which was Miracle on 34th Street. Now, I really could use Miracle on 34th Street for several others, but I'm going to read some other things for those. The other thing that I read that I want to mention to you that I am reading for Advent. This is just an Advent reading. You don't have to read it as Advent, but at the beginning of the book, it kind of gives you 3 different ways to read this book. He suggests you could read it all the way through. You could read it by each day because it is divided into 30 days and use it for Advent. And then read the back because there are poems and some little essays and things at the back, you know, after Christmas to finish up. Or just read it, you know, whenever you want to. But I chose to read it for Advent. So I started on Advent and I am loving this book. It's called Winter Fire by Ryan Whitaker Smith. But it's the writings of G.K. Chesterton. It is the writings that G.K. Chesterton wrote in different essays and newspaper articles and magazines and journals during his life about Christmas and celebrating Christmas. And I have never read such a wonderful Advent before. I have all kinds of Advents. I've read all sorts of Advents I have found them online. I have picked up little devotional books. I've read all kinds of Advent books, you know, little scripture readings and little devotional things to read during Advent because I like doing that. It's a great way to start my morning and just keep focus on the main reason. Jesus is the reason for the season. But this one is different. It doesn't, you know, most of them do this whole thing of, you know, the prophet Isaiah, you know, had this prophecy about Jesus and all those things. You'll have the same scriptures over and over. And I'm not opposed to that. This is the time that we kind of read a lot of those and celebrate them. And I love those scripture. I'm not saying that. But this one just, I don't know. G.K. Chesterton was such a genius. And his outlook, his thoughts, his way of expressing, conveying his message about Christmas is totally different than anything I've read before. And that's why I love it, because it gives me a new perspective on the story of Christmas. And I am loving it. I am just loving it. He talks about things like, you know, God being outside of time and things in a different way than I've ever heard it expressed. And I don't even know how to describe it, but I am taking so many notes on this, and I'm not going to talk too much about it here because I just started it. But so far, it is like every day I say that reading was better than any of the others I've read, the best one yet. And I've said that like every day. And it's very simple. It starts with, and oh, look at there's all these vintage Christmas pictures in here too. So y'all know I love it just for that. let's find some that are just gorgeous. I mean, look at this. Look at those pictures. They're all the way through this book. And so I can't wait to get to the back, because the back has essays and poetry and recipes and stuff. Let's see if I can find one more pretty picture. They're all the way through it, and I'm flipping through like I can't find any. I mean, they're just gorgeous. Gorgeous. And it is definitely feels vintage because of that. But the days, let's look at a day. So you have day 4, and it gives you the title, and then under it is just a little bit that he wrote, and then this Ryan Whitaker Smith gives his thought in about a page or two. And all through the page or two that he is responding to this little bit that G.K. Chesterton wrote in one of his Christmas articles, he quotes G.K. Chesterton even more. And then at the end of that, there is a scripture reading and some little, maybe a question or a couple of thoughts about what you've read and that scripture. It's wonderful. I love it. Now, I'm not the biggest on little devotional reads. I'm not saying they're not good. I'm not saying that. I read devotionals from time to time. But I like a deep dive into the Bible. I like to get a book on, Hebrews, and just really dive in bit by bit. Right now I'm doing a great Roman study, and it's verse by verse of Romans. I like that kind of study. So when I do an Advent kind of thing, it's not my normal kind of thought-provoking. I mean, they're thought-provoking, but it's not as deep to me. I don't know what I'm trying to say. They're just quick little things to kind of start your day. And that's fantastic. I'm not putting them down at all. But what I enjoy more is more of a deep dive into a Bible study. And so that's why I like this Advent. It is the feel of a devotional, just a little bit each morning. But the thought that he gives, you ponder on all day. And so that's why I like it, because I am writing so many notes to now, after I'm done with the book, I can go back and deep dive into each one of those. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's just my preference on what I like for Bible study. Again, I'm not knocking anybody that reads devotionals. I like devotionals and I read them, but I prefer more of a, like, this book of the Bible kind of study, if that makes any sense. And so this was great for me for Advent, but also I think it'll kickstart a lot of other little studies I can do in my Bible reading. So that excites me too. Anyway, I highly recommend this, and this makes me want to read more G.K. Chesterton, because I have read Father Brown, Mysteries. I've read a couple of other things by him. His, what's that one? Orthodoxy. I've read that. That's been a long time ago. I need to revisit that. And I have another one of his classics on my shelf that I need to read. But now I want to do a deep dive into G.K. Chesterton, because he's fantastic. I love him. So that was a great start to my December reading as well. And it will continue. That's what's so great about this one, because there are 30 days of readings in here, plus the essays and things at the back. So I will just keep reading this through Christmas and beyond. So I'm excited for that. So I highly recommend that too. Okay, so those are the things that I've read, but these are some things that I want to read this week, and I kind of wanted to talk to you about in case you want to find some of these to read too, because I'm always wanting to share some of these vintage Christmas books with you. So this one I'm really excited about. It's a picture book, and I found this at an antique store, and as soon as I saw it, I said, I want that book. I don't care how much it is, I want it. Well, it wasn't that much. Let's see if the price is still in the front. No, the price isn't in it. I don't think it was but a few dollars. But anyway, and it was on sale in the little booth. They were having like a 20% off sale. So I bought it. Well, it's Christmas in Noisy Village. Y'all, look at that cover. So this is a picture book. And the reason I wanted it, look at the pictures in this. Is that not gorgeous? So the reason I wanted this is I had read The Children of Noisy Village either this year or last year. I read this book. I picked this up on a whim because it's by Astrid Lindgren, I guess is how you say it, who wrote Pippi Longstocking. If you've read Pippi Longstocking, you've read her work. So she has the Pippi Longstocking series, but she also wrote these Noisy Village books, and this is the first one. Well, I looked for this and I could not find it. The Children in Noisy Village. Well, I saw it on eBay, but it was too much money. So when I went in this antique store and saw it, I said, yeah. And this was like a month ago when I had just announced that I was going to do the Very Vintage Christmas Readathon. So I was really excited. I thought, I'll use that for the Very Vintage Christmas Readathon. And I loved, hang on a second. Okay, sorry, my books were falling. I loved Pippi Longstocking, and I really loved The Children of Noisy Village. And I think there's one more in this. I think this might be a trilogy, so I need to hunt that down. But I can't wait to read the little picture book. And this will take me, you know, a few minutes to read because it is a picture book. So for a Christmas wedding, I could use Miracle on 34th Street because there was a romance. But I'm going to use this book, A Very Russian Christmas. And I'm going to read the Dostoevsky's A Christmas Tree and a Wedding short story that is in this collection, because that was what that prompt is based on, and I'm just interested in that short story. So I'm going to read that this week, and I'm also going to try to read some from this Journey into Christmas, which is by Bess Streeter Aldrich. And a couple of you have told me about her book. Let's see what it's called. It's in here. It's called A Lantern in Her Hand. And I plan on reading that because several of you told me to read it. So I do have it, and I'm going to read that soon. And I think there's actually an excerpt from that book in here. So I do want to read a couple of the short stories out of here. This is a beautiful vintage book. And look at the back of that. So I want to read from this. And I also want to read from Norman Rockwell's Christmas book, Yes, Virginia, There is a Santa Claus, for a letter from Santa, to fulfill that prompt on the game board. So those are some books that I plan on reading this week. Right now I'm reading two classics that have nothing to do with Christmas. I'm reading those with Faith, and so I need to make sure I read that and then squeeze these in when I can. So I'm excited about Very Vintage Christmas, and I'm just loving every minute of it. So let me know if you read any of these, and are you participating in the Very Vintage Christmas Readathon? Let me know that too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.